The millionaire's wife bullied staff until the new waitress revealed an incredible truth. The bell above the door jangled, and chaos brewed inside the friendly fork like a pot boiling over. Bea wiped her brow, the weight of the day pressing on her shoulders. As a single mom, she worked tirelessly, her heart driven by the bright smile of her daughter, Lily. At just 7, Lily's joy was her anchor in the storm of diner life and endless bills. The noise of clinking silverware, sizzling bacon, and the laughter of families blended into a familiar symphony that always vibrated her spirit. But there was one sour note. Margaret, the self-proclaimed queen of the suburb, swept in with her designer handbags and scornful smirk, casting her icy gaze over the staff. Her condescending remarks cut deeper than any knife. "Bea, dear, are you sure you'd rather be here than out chasing your dreams?" She sneered while adjusting her pearl necklace. The laughter of other patrons faded, and Bea's cheeks flushed with anger, but she kept her head down, focusing on orders to prevent Margaret from seeing her pain point one day. A new waitress named Jamie joined the friendly fork, her vibrant energy illuminating the chaos around them. With a wild shock of red hair and a bright smile, she brought a warmth that seemed to chase away the shadows. Jamie never faltered when faced with Margaret's scorn. "Excuse me, but I believe everyone deserves kindness, don't you?" She shot back, her confidence turning heads and quieting whispers. It was a moment that inspired Bea and her colleagues, igniting a spark of solidarity. But as the sun rose higher, so too did the threat of Margaret. Bea felt tension crackle in the air, and in the midst of it all, Jamie remained unshakable, connecting with customers in small, powerful ways. A kind word for a shy child, an extra cookie for a lonely elder. Each small gesture knitted the diner closer together, creating a fortress against Margaret's cruelty. Before we continue, I need to let you know about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, hit that bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can drop a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The day finally arrived when the clash could no longer be avoided. Jamie stood up to Margaret in a way that made hearts race, a showdown that electrified the diner. "You think your wealth defines you, but it's character that dictates worth," she exclaimed, eyes blazing. With a hush falling over all, she then revealed an unexpected truth. She was the estranged niece of Margaret's husband, a fact that shocked everyone into silence. The air felt thick, laden with astonishment. Questions sparked in the eyes of patrons and staff alike. Who would step forward now? Would they bow to the status quo that Margaret held, or link arms in unity against her? Bea felt her heart pound as she watched the diner's faces transform from skepticism to echoes of support. Justice or despair, worth or snobbery, everything hung in the balance. And in that charged moment, the question lingered in the air, waiting to be answered. What does it truly mean to have value? The diner, once a bright haven, now held a fragile tension that promised transformation. How this would unfold, only time knew, but Bea was ready to stand and fight for dignity. The diner felt electric, filled with whispers, some in disbelief, and others caught in a sense of solidarity. Bea's heart raced as she observed how Jamie's bold declaration shifted the atmosphere almost instantly. Patrons exchanged knowing glances, some even nodding in agreement. Was it possible? Could they unite against Margaret, the woman who had wielded her privilege like a sword for far too long? Margaret's face paled, but her bravado held fast. "You're just a waitress. Don't delude yourself into thinking you belong in my world," she retorted, her voice steady, but tinged with panic, an undercurrent of vulnerability barely concealed by her icy demeanor. "Maybe this isn't about her world at all," Jamie shot back, her voice unwavering. "It's about our world. The world of honesty, kindness, and respect. You might have your diamonds and fancy clothes, but that doesn't make you better than any of us." The audacity in Jamie's words rang clear, igniting a fire in the hearts of everyone present. Bea felt her chest swell with pride. She wanted to join Jamie's side, to stand tall beside her like a shield against the storm that was Margaret. Yet uncertainties gnawed at her. What could Bea really do? She was just a single mother with a string of bills and a need to keep her job. But as Jamie faced the queen of cruelty, that same fire awakened something within her, the courage that had always lain dormant. Around the diner, the murmurs began to swell, creating a tide of support. Customers stood up, one by one. A mother with her baby in a carrier spoke first. "We don't need to be treated this way." "Yeah, enough is enough," shouted an older man at the counter, his fists tightly clenched. Margaret's composure began to crack. "You fools. This is absurd. You'll regret this." She spat, but the power in her voice started to fizzle, overwhelmed by the collective resolve she had underestimated. Bea caught the glistening determination in Jamie's eyes, a reflection of her own budding bravery. It was a call to arms, and suddenly, Bea found herself stepping forward. "We deserve dignity, Margaret," she called out, her voice shaking with emotion, but resolute. "You may have wealth, but our spirit can't be broken." "Exactly," yelled a kitchen worker, who had quietly endured Margaret's barbs for too long. "We're not your servants." The diner erupted in cheers, voices mingling into a symphony celebrating her words. Hope coursed through the air, invigorating the team at the friendly fork. Bea felt alive, filled with a thrill she hadn't felt in ages. Together they were reshaping the narrative, untying the knots that had bound them in silence for so long. But just as victory seemed to breathe life into their rebellion, Margaret's eyes narrowed. "You'll regret crossing me. You don't know what I can do." A chill ran through the gathering, uncertainty creeping back in. Bea realized the stakes were higher than just hurtful words. Margaret was not just a bully. She was a woman with resources to bend others to her will. Is this the fight we want? Bea wondered, fear mixing with fierce determination. They could stand against the bullying and deceit that had long been normalized or risk everything they had worked for. Jamie stood strong, holding her ground. "Together, we're stronger than you'll ever know, Margaret." As the tension thickened, it was clear their fate was about to shift dramatically. Would they still have the strength to fight back when the true depths of Margaret's wrath were unleashed? The air quivered with anticipation, leaving everyone on edge, waiting for the storm to descend. The diner's atmosphere hung thick with tension, each face a blend of fear and defiance. Bea's heart pounded as she locked eyes with Jamie. There was a shared understanding, a silent promise. They were in this together. Margaret's expression twisted into something fierce, full of contempt. "You think you can just stand against me? Look around. You're outnumbered. You're just a bunch of nobodies." Her voice dripped with venom, but the crack in her facade was growing wider. "You act like your money makes you untouchable, but it doesn't. We're stronger together," shouted a young woman at the back, her fists raised high. The camaraderie swelled, and voices echoed in agreement. Bea could feel the weight of the room shifting, their resolve hardening, but a slight murmur of encouragement rippled through. Each minute that passed pulled them closer to an unknown future, one that either spelled hope or disaster. Bea could almost taste the fear in Margaret's words, sharp and bitter, as it collided with the sweet rush of collective courage that filled the diner. "What's the worst you can do?" A little girl from a nearby booth piped up, her innocent voice cutting through the tension like a knife. "You're just a mean lady." The patrons erupted into laughter, a moment of levity that brightened the dark atmosphere. Margaret's eyes narrowed as she surveyed the growing crowd of supporters. The realization was dawning on her, her authority was slipping. "You think this is a game? I can ruin you," she hissed, desperation edging into her tone. But instead of cowering, the people surged forward, emboldened by the warmth of solidarity. Bea felt her heart stutter momentarily as Jamie stepped even closer to Margaret. "No more threats. We're not afraid of you," she declared, her words echoing in the now charged space. The excitement of rebellion clashed with the reality of their circumstance. Each person present had something to lose. Bea felt the weight of her responsibilities as a single mother lurking in the background, but now it dulled beneath the louder call of justice. The chatter transformed from whispers of anxiety to bold declarations of unity, each voice reinforcing the message that they wouldn't be silenced any longer. Suddenly, the diner doors swung open with a rush. The familiar figure of Bob, the owner, stepped in. His eyes went wide as he took in the scene before him. "What is going on here?" he asked, cutting through the excitement with a mix of confusion and concern. We're standing up to Margaret, Jamie shouted, her hand gesturing toward the woman who had long held them in her grip. We refuse to be belittled any longer. Bob turned his gaze toward Margaret, his expression shifting from shock to something more menacing. You have no right to treat my staff this way, he said, his voice steady but hard. I want to have it. Margaret's bravado faltered, and for a fleeting moment, vulnerability flickered in her eyes. You'll regret this. You don't understand who you're dealing with, she warned, but the confident veneer was wearing thin as the crowd leaned in. He could feel the thunder of heartbeats echoing in her ears. Would Bob side with them? Would he finally put an end to Margaret's reign of terror? The question lingered, heavy in the air, filled with anticipation. It was a moment of truth, where one decision could either break the dam of oppression or let it flood with chaos, and they were all waiting to see which way the tide would turn. What would happen if Margaret unleashed the full force of her fury? Bob's voice rang clear against the growing clamor. Margaret, I've given you too many chances. You think you own this place on us. But you don't. His gaze swept through the diner, gathering strength from the frightened faces he'd come to care about. These people deserve respect, and I want to have them intimidated in my establishment. The crowd exhaled a collective sigh, a moment of disbelief followed by a swell of hope. He felt warmth spread through her chest. Bob was stepping up. That wall of fear they all stood behind began to crack. Margaret's eyes flickered with fury, her lips curling as she faced Bob. You really think this is over? She spat, her voice rising dangerously. You'll regret this. You're making a mistake. But the faint tremor in her tone revealed the uncertainty buried beneath her bravado. You're the one making the mistake, Margaret, shouted Jamie. Her voice was almost a rallying cry now as she took a few steps forward, fists clenched, defiance radiating from her like sunlight. This is about more than just your money. It's about us, our lives here, our dignity. With each word, the atmosphere thickened with purpose. The crowd surged closer, emboldened and animated. He felt the adrenaline coursing through her veins as voices rose higher, merging into a symphony of resistance. Even the little girl who had previously spoken up now stood on her booth, declaring, Yeah, go away, mean lady. Margaret wavered, her steely confidence beginning to shatter. She turned her gaze, darting from face to face, the laughter and courage mocking her. You're foolish to believe that this will change anything, she hissed as her composure frayed. Look, Bob interjected, stepping between her and the crowd. This is a community, Margaret. You thought you could keep scaring everyone into submission, but today, it ends. His voice boomed with authority, echoing around the diner, invigorating the air that a chant began to rise from the crowd. Respect, respect, respect. Each repetition hammered against the walls, breaking the oppressive silence Margaret had maintained for too long. In the middle of the gathering, he felt her breath catch. She was part of something larger, something that mattered. But alongside that thrill, uncertainty loomed like storm clouds. What would happen next? Could Margaret retaliate? The thought prickled at her mind. Margaret, realizing the tide had changed, raised an eyebrow threateningly. You really think this will go unchecked? There was a gleam in her eye, a hint at desperation mingling with her calculated anger. I have power. I will destroy your lives. All of you. Then let us see what that power really means. Jamie shot back, her fists shaking with both fear and courage. We're done being your pawns. The diners erupted again, louder this time, an unbreakable wave of support surging forward. Shouts mingled with claps, and murmurs electrified the air with mounting energy. The diner was a cauldron of emotions now, the place buzzing not just with excitement, but also fear of what was to come. Bea's heart raced. This was it, the moment they'd all been waiting for. As Margaret took a step back, regaining some composure, the air felt thick with anticipation. Who would walk away victorious? The silence that followed was palpable, filled with unanswered questions and the weight of choices made in that charged atmosphere. He finally realized what was needed. Let us show Margaret our strength, she breathed, barely above a whisper, but filled with intention. Let us gather everyone we can. But would they have the strength to face whatever storm Margaret might unleash next? The tension in the room solidified as they prepared for the battle ahead, the stakes raised higher than they'd ever imagined. What would happen when the dust settled? Who would be left standing? The diner's walls felt alive, pulsing with the energy of defiance. Bea turned to her fellow diners, scanning their faces. Some were scared, but the glimmers of determination sparked like fireflies in the night. She clutched Jamie's arm tightly. "We need to rally everyone we can," she repeated, her voice strong. Jamie nodded, eyes sparkling with tenacity. "I'll go to the cafe down the street. I know Rita will spread the word quick. We need backup." Bob stood firm, taking a breath as if readying himself for battle. "Margaret thrives on fear. We need to show her we're not afraid anymore." His gaze swept over the crowd, seeking assurance. "Do you all stand with us?" The crowd erupted in a resounding cheer, voices melding into one powerful affirmation. "Yeah, we're with you." He felt a swell of pride. They were taking a stand. But what if it backfired? Margaret wasn't just a bully, she was dangerous. The door swung open, and in walked a couple of familiar faces. It was Tom and Kelly, patrons who had witnessed more than their share of Margaret's tyranny, but had always kept to the shadows. They had been allies in hushed conversations, but now the spark of courage shone brightly in their eyes. "We heard the commotion," Tom said, breathless but fired up. "We want to help. What is the plan?" "We're organizing," Jamie said, her chin tilted defiantly. "We'll unite everyone. No more intimidation. Count us in," Kelly added, stepping forward. There was a fierceness in her voice that echoed with conviction. Bea felt hope blooming as more people from the diner joined in. Even older folks, typically quiet, began to murmur their support. Together, they formed a circle surrounding Bob and Jamie, their hearts beating as one. Then came the loud clash of a chair scraping against the floor, and all eyes turned to Margaret, who was slowly regaining her poise. "You're all fools," she sneered, crossing her arms. "This is a futile effort. I have resources and connections. You think you can topple my reign?" Her voice dripped with condescension, but with each barbed word, the crowd's resolve only grew. "We will take back what you have tried to steal," Jamie said, her voice steady. "You've underestimated us for too long, Margaret." Margaret's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, she seemed to reconsider her strategy. The bravado slipped, her mask of control slipped as the crowd pressed on, a living wall of solidarity. Bea's heart raced. What would Margaret do next? In the thickness of tension, a woman burst through the doorway. Diana, a former waitress who had left the diner under Margaret's oppressive thumb. She stood tall and fierce, the weight of her experiences evident in her expression. "I'm here for justice," she declared, echoing the sentiments of the crowd. The atmosphere shifted. With each additional ally, the air crackled with potential. Could this finally be the turning point? But as Margaret's eyes darted around, they caught sight of something darker. "You think you can win?" she spat, rage boiling just beneath the surface. "This is just the beginning. I'll make sure you never work in this town again." The words hung in the air, threatening shadows looming over brave faces. Still, Bea stood firm alongside her friends, pushing the fear deep down. They had come too far to turn back now. As the tension became palpable, they all braced themselves for the confrontation that was sure to follow. Will their unity be enough, or would Margaret's threats come to fruition? In that charged moment, Bea knew something was shifting. They were standing at the edge of a storm, and no one knew how it would end. But deep inside, she felt a flicker of hope. Could they really make a difference? In the throes of the moment, Margaret's expression turned cold and calculating. What would her next move be? The dinner rush faded into the background as they prepared for the fight of their lives. What was about to unfold could change everything they knew. Would they conquer their fears, or would fear conquer them first? The tension hung thick in the diner, an electric current that made the air crackle. Bea could feel her heart hammering against her ribs. All eyes were on Margaret, watching for her next move like a room full of deer caught in headlights. Yet, as threatening as she was, the crowd surrounding Bea and her friends stood resolute, their fear morphing into something far more potent. Margaret sneered. "Do you really think you can outlast me? I'll crush your little rebellion before it even begins." Her voice rose, fueled by frustration. But standing there, united, Bea could see the fear diminishing in her fellow diners. Their resolve solidified. They had no intentions of backing down. "It's not just your fight anymore, Margaret," Diana said, stepping forward with a fierce determination. "This town knows what you've done. We've lived under your shadow for too long." The crowd murmured their agreement, and momentum began to build. More and more voices joined in. Bea could feel the unity swelling around her, feeding her courage. Each shout breathed life into their cause, echoing against the diner walls, which now felt like a fortress rather than a confined space. Margaret's expression darkened, a storm brewing behind her eyes. "You think you can take on my power?" she challenged. "I have lawyers. I have money. This isn't a game." "Maybe it's you who turned this into a game," Kelly countered, her voice steady. "Playing with people's lives like pieces on a chessboard. But this isn't checkers, Margaret. And we won't be a pawn anymore." The crowd erupted into cheers again, voices growing louder, drowning out Margaret's fury. For the first time, the fear faded just enough for Bea to catch a glimpse of what they could achieve together. A future where they could all stand proud. Margaret stepped closer, her eyes icy. "You don't know who you're messing with. I can destroy you." "Maybe," Bea challenged, finding her own voice. "But we're done waiting for you to decide our worth. We will not be silenced any longer." The roar of agreement that followed was deafening, vibrating through the diner. The energy around them swirled, a living testament to courage rising against oppression. Just then, the front door swung open again. In walked Rita, her eyes wide and filled with confusion, but she quickly caught the intensity in the room. "What is happening?" she asked, taking in the scene of solidarity. "Rallying the troops," Jamie said, giving her a brief smile. "Join us." Rita nodded, stepping into the circle. "Count me in. Margaret has taken too much from us all." The once quiet diner erupted with hope and passion. It was igniting, setting ablaze the old fears and past intimidations. Bea's heart raced, a mix of excitement and trepidation. They were becoming more than a group of individuals fighting a singular battle. They were family fighting for each other and for every person who had ever suffered under Margaret's rule. With each new face that joined them, Bea could feel the tide turning. But Margaret was far from done. Her eyes flickered with something dangerous, a new strategy forming behind the mask of fury. "You think this is a game? I'll show you just how far I'm willing to go to keep my power. You think you're tough? Just wait and see." Those words hung in the air like the calm before a storm. Bea held her breath. There was no going back now. The stakes were high, and Margaret's threats hung like clouds shrouded in darkness, promising a tempest. What was she truly capable of? And beneath it all, the flicker of hope burned brighter. In the heart of the diner, the battle lines were drawn. Would they rise to the occasion, or would they succumb to the weight of Margaret's threats? The fight was far from over, and truly, it was about to get personal. How would they confront the reckoning that was sure to come next? The frenzied energy in the diner reached a fever pitch. Bea looked around, her heart swelling with pride and fear. The stakes had never felt higher, and Margaret's words lingered menacingly in the air. With every passing second, she felt the collective heartbeat of the crowd, a rhythmic pulse that matched the determination etched on their faces. Margaret straightened up. "You all think you're safe in numbers?" she sneered, her voice dripping with contempt. "I have people watching you. I know your secrets. I'll reveal your darkest moments, and watch as you crumble under the weight of your shame." Diana stepped closer to Bea, her eyes fierce and resolute. "We're not afraid of you, Margaret. We've lived in fear long enough. It ends tonight." "That's right," shouted Jamie, her voice cutting through the rising tension. "You don't scare us anymore. This is our town, too." Bea felt a fire ignite within her. These were her friends and neighbors, people she had shared laughter and tears with. They weren't just standing for themselves. They were standing for everyone who had ever been too afraid to speak up. She glanced at the door as if expecting reinforcements. They needed more help. More voices to chime in. "I won't let you ruin this moment," Margaret spat, clenching her hands. "You're all naive. You think you can just overthrow me? I will make sure you regret this." "What you don't realize, Margaret," Bea said, stepping forward with a newfound confidence, "is that we're no longer afraid of losing your approval. We've found our strength, and that makes us powerful." The collective murmur of agreement surged like a tidal wave, cresting and crashing over Margaret's intimidation. Each person in the diner had their own story, their own struggles, and together they became unbreakable. Margaret's smugness shook, if only for a second, and she clenched her jaw, her icy demeanor faltering. "You want to see how powerful I am?" Her voice dropped to a chilling whisper, threatening yet alluring. "I want to just come after you. I will come after what you love. Friends, family. I will take away your peace. The chatter in the diner stilled, everyone feeling the weight of her threats. Silence wrapped around them like a heavy blanket. B's breath quickened. What did that mean for her little sister? For her mother? Is that all you've got, Margaret? Kelly's voice broke through the silence, defiant and strong. You're just a bully hiding behind money and threats. But we've got each other, which is worth more than anything you have. Yes, shouted Rita, her fists clenched in utter conviction. This isn't just about us. It's about everyone you've stepped on to keep your throne. The energy surged again, this time more electric, a current that crackled with possibility. He felt a wave of determination wash over her. This was more than a rebellion. It was a movement, a cacophony of voices rising against oppression. Margaret stepped back, her bravado slipping under the weight of their unity. You think this is a movement? I will show you fear. She turned and stormed toward the door. Don't back down. Jamie yelled after her. You can't hide forever. But Margaret's retreat felt ominous as she slammed the door behind her. Silence followed her departure. The adrenaline still pulsed through B's veins, a mixture of triumph and dread knotted in her stomach. They had drawn the line, but what would happen once Margaret regrouped? Did we really just do that? Diana's voice was trembling with disbelief and excitement, her face flushed. Yes, B shouted. We did. Together. But as joy flooded the diner, a creeping anxiety lingered. They had challenged the storm, yes. But storms could be devastating. Just then, the lights flickered ominously overhead. The power surged, then dimmed, and a shadow loomed ominously in the back. B swallowed hard. What now? In that moment, uncertainty filled every corner of the diner. The battle was just beginning, and their greatest challenge was still ahead. What would Margaret do next, and who would she take down with her? A tense silence gripped the diner, each young and old face focused on the flickering lights and omen, piercing through the joy that had just been allowed to bloom. He felt a chill race up her spine. What if Margaret had backup? What if tonight turned into a nightmare? Everyone, stay together. Diana's voice rose above the unsettling quiet. We can't let fear creep back in. But as B scanned the group, uncertainty danced in their eyes, like shadows in the corners of the diner. Rita, her hands still tightly balled into fists, seemed to stew in a concoction of anger and worry. Jamie, though resolved, had a hint of doubt flickering behind her stare. Then the door swung open again, but this time it wasn't Margaret stepping through. A uniformed officer entered, his face taut with concern. What is happening here? We received a report of a disturbance. B was instantly skeptical. Had Margaret called the police? Were they here to intimidate? Officer, she began. But before she could finish, the officer's gaze shifted to the diner's dim entrance. Another shadow emerged, and this time, it was someone familiar, a friend, a loyal face amid the fear. Anyone seen Lila? Sarah breathlessly rushed in behind the officer, her cheeks flushed and hair wild. She hasn't answered her phone. B blinked, instantly realizing who Lila was. Memories flooded her mind. Lila and her sister giggling in school, the girl who always had a supportive ear. She's okay, right? B asked, her heart racing. She wasn't around when things got tense with Margaret? Nope, she's not, Sarah panted, glancing nervously at the officer. I just saw her talking with some people outside the diner. I think they were with Margaret. Panic shot through the group, knees grown weak. We can't leave her out there with them. What if they try something? Diana snapped, her voice barely contained. It was the fear of letting one of their own be taken down by a threat too big to fully comprehend. Listen, the officer interrupted, cutting through the swelling fear. I can't leave here until I know everyone is accounted for. We can't risk anything escalating. B's heart raced. What if they all got scared and fell back into silence? She stepped closer to the officer, her voice steady but urgent. We're not the ones causing trouble, officer. It's Margaret. She's been controlling, bullying us for far too long. We need to stand up for Lila and show her that we won't be pushed down anymore. The officer's eyes softened just a fraction. Grassroots movements like this can be inspiring, but they can also attract unwanted attention. Are you sure you want to go after her? Yes, B asserted, heat rising in her chest. We won't let her take away the people we love anymore. We have to save Lila. Everyone in the diner gathered around B, their resolve hardening in the face of uncertainty. She felt the tide shifting, the collective courage rising within them again. If we go out together, we'll bring Lila back. Together, we can't be broken. Their voices united, a chorus of agreement rang out, drowning out the doubt. As Bea turned back to the officer, determination blazing in her eyes, she noticed a flicker of hesitation behind his badge. If you're all going out there, at least let me come with you. I won't let anyone harm you. The diner felt alive with purpose and urgency. Holding hands, they clustered around the officer, stepping toward the door, each moment echoing the weight of their fears, but also the strength of their unity. Yet, as they pushed through the threshold of the diner, the street appeared different, a charged battlefield waiting for their presence. Bea squinted against the darkening sky, shadows pooling around corners where danger might lurk. The moment of truth is here, she breathed, her heart pounding. No matter what we face it together. But as they moved forward, a distant shout cut through the air, and a glimmer of something ominous flared in the corner of her eye. What awaited them outside? Would they reclaim their voice? Or was Margaret prepared to unleash her full power against them? The night air crackled with energy as Bea and the group stepped into the open, the weight of impending confrontation settling heavily on their shoulders. The police officer, standing slightly ahead, seemed to scan both sides of the street, his posture a mix of protection and uncertainty. Stick close, he instructed, his voice low and steady, but the tension in the air felt like a live wire. Bea's heart raced as they moved forward, the shadows of the diner shrinking behind them. Lila, she called, her voice trembling slightly as she echoed into the dark. The sound ricocheted off nearby buildings, swallowed by the looming silence. Do you think she's okay? Jamie whispered, eyes wide and reflecting the vague light from the street lamps. Bea glanced at her, instinctively gripping her hand. We have to believe she is. She's strong, like all of us, she replied, trying to infuse the moment with hope. But doubt loomed. Every step echoed louder as they dashed along the pavement, and the fears of Margaret's cruel grip returned to haunt their minds. They could feel her influence creeping back, carving twists of doubt in their hearts. Suddenly, they heard voices, harsh laughter mixed with shouts that struck like ice in their veins. Let us go, Diana asserted, taking the lead. Over here. Sarah pointed down an alleyway, the source of the commotion barely visible from where they stood. A flickering light illuminated angry figures gathered around what appeared to be a makeshift staging area. Wait, the officer cautioned, holding up a hand. His face turned from uncertainty to resolve, a protective instinct deep within him igniting. Let me go first. The group watched, breath held, as he stepped cautiously towards the chaos. Margaret? The officer called, voice steady despite the fact that his body was tense as a string pulled tight. The laughter quieted, and a figure stepped into view. Margaret stood there, clad in dark attire, flanked by a couple of tough-looking individuals. For a moment, Bea caught a glimpse of triumph on Margaret's face, as if she were savoring the fear of a fresh audience. Ah, the misunderstood do-gooders have arrived, she taunted, a smirk playing on her lips. What is it you want? To save your friend? A waste of time, I assure you. Bea's heart pounded in her chest, but she pushed through, stepping forward beside the officer. Let Lila go. You don't have to do this, she demanded, her voice firm, lips pressed together in defiance. Margaret's gaze shifted, momentarily surprised by their bravery, confusion mingled with arrogance. And why should I? You are all so fond of being weak. It suits you. The group around Bea stiffened, drawing strength from her words. We won't be weak anymore, she called back, her statement ringing like a battle cry. In the flickering shadows, a muffled voice called out from behind the thugs. Bea, help me. Lila. Bea's heart leaped in her chest. Lila, she shouted, moving forward, but the officer stepped in front of her, eyes darting in warning. It wasn't just the thugs they were dealing with. Hold on, he said, scanning the group ahead. And just when it felt like hope might shatter at any moment, another sound cracked through the air, a harsh, splintering noise that diverted everyone's gaze. A figure burst out from the tangled shadows, racing towards the light. Bea squinted, trying to make out the shape. Could it be Lila? Then the figure paused, and in that moment, everything shifted. Don't move, all of you, came a voice, one that carried an unexpected sense of authority, but with an edge of urgency. B's heart sank, but curiosity twisted in her gut. Who else was out there? Would this be the support they needed, or just another challenge? As the uncertain figure stepped into prominence, their next move would dictate everything. Was it hope, or another layer to the chaos? The figure stepped into the glow, revealing a young woman, Carmen, a former colleague from the Friendly Fork. She looked wild but determined. I gathered a few friends to help, she shouted. The weight on B's heart lightened, but apprehension still clung to the air. Is Lila okay? B shouted back, trying to gauge the situation. She's back here, Carmen exclaimed, glancing at the rough crowd surrounding Margaret. They've been holding her, but we can break through. The tension in the alley shifted. Hope sparked among the group beside B. Enough games. Margaret snapped, irritation flashing in her eyes. You think a few more bodies will intimidate me? You're out of your league. But this time, her confidence felt shaky. The group around B shifted, every heart beating in sync with a pulse of courage that wouldn't be stifled. We'll take her together, B declared, her voice carrying conviction. It was no longer just about Lila. It was about standing firm against a bully who thought she could wield fear as a weapon. Diana, stepping forward beside B, clenched her fists. We've bullied long enough, Margaret. You'll face the people you've terrorized. We won't allow it anymore. The thugs flanking Margaret exchanged uncertain glances. Maybe we should leave? One muttered, his bravado faltering. As if sensing the shift, Margaret's voice ratcheted up, filled with a desperate need for control. You don't know what I'm capable of. You will regret this. Again, the officer stepped forward, firmly commanding. You know what I can do as a law enforcement official, Margaret. This isn't your playground anymore. Right, because breaking the law is so much fun for you. Margaret shot back, but her bravado broke like glass against the weight of unity and courage in the alley. Lila's muffled cries broke through once again. Please, get me out of here. B felt her resolve strengthen. Stay strong, Lila. We're coming, she yelled, pointing towards the thugs. As if driven by a collective intention, the growing crowd surged forward, their energy coiling tight, then bursting with shared determination. B's heart raced, fueled by the palpable support of those around her. They had endured long enough. On three, the officer signaled, rallying their defenses. 1, 2, 3. With that, everyone charged forward, pushing past the thugs blocking the way. The alley erupted, a whirlwind of shouting, blurred motion, and adrenaline. The rough figures faltered, taken by surprise as people began to weave through, bond by bond. B's eyes focused back on the fray as she pushed deeper. A glimmer of hope shined brighter as she saw Lila crouched against the wall. Lila, we got you, she yelled, stretching out her hand. B, thank you, Lila cried, her eyes wide with fear but shining with relief. With determination, B reached her friend and pulled her to safety, the group behind them amplifying strength and defiance. The thugs tried to establish control, but fear began to wane as the tide of unity surged, voices lifting in a combined assurance that together they were unbreakable. Margaret, glaring from where she stood cornered, grew increasingly agitated. You think this ends here? You've made a mistake. And you think you can go back to your old ways? Jamie shot back, stepping beside B, her presence strong and commanding. Not anymore. The crowd surged forward, encasing Margaret in a bubble of unified resistance. Let us show her how together we reclaim our dignity, B shouted, feeling the stirring strength within her body pulsing in rhythm with every shout and cheer that erupted behind her. We stand not just for us, but for those who couldn't. In that tumultuous moment, the gathered forces became unyielding, resolute against the shadows that had once controlled them. Margaret turned, panic flashing in her eyes, realizing the walls closing in around her. You'll all regret this, but as her desperate threats faded against the roaring defiance from the throng, B felt a shift. The group pushed forward, bolstered by shared courage, no longer pawns in Margaret's game. No more fear. Margaret, we're taking back our lives. And with that spirit, they began to unfurl, each declaration of strength echoing promise and resilience. The bright lights from the diner behind them twinkled like stars, a shining beacon of hope illuminating the pathway ahead, where shadows dissolved into the dawn of a new day. In the wake of their collective victory, beheld Lila close, tears of relief and joy flowing freely. "We did it. We're free," she exclaimed, laughter peppering her words. Cheers erupted, a mixture of celebration and reassurance ringing out across the alley. The weight of oppression lifted, and as they all embraced, the warmth of unity wrapped around them like a cherished blanket. They were not just survivors anymore. They were warriors for change, and each one counted. "Let us rebuild what we've lost, together," Bea proclaimed, her heart swelling with a newfound sense of belonging. They had uncovered their worth, a priceless treasure that would never again be held hostage by fear. The streets, bustling with life again, were filled with the promise of a brighter, kinder tomorrow. And as the sun began to rise, Bea knew their journey toward healing and hope had only just begun. They would fight together, always, lifting one another in a chorus of resilience, forever rejoicing, forever brave. This is the moment of promise, the moment of unity. Together, they would not only reclaim their diner, but their lives, their community, and the heart of who they were. Now is the time for you to step up. Subscribe immediately to the channel so you don't miss the next exclusive stories that uplift and inspire. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and show your support for these incredible tales. Comment your reactions and feelings about this ending. You need to be part of this community. Share this video instantly with at least 5 friends who need to see this transformation. Only true fans understand how vital your support is right now. Don't wait, not even one more second to share.